Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the AWS Summit studio show. We've actually reached that time of day where it's the daily wrap, and we'd love to hear from you, our audience. What was your favourite part of today's program? We'll actually be sharing the best comments at the end of this segment. Now, after so many inspiring breakout sessions, Q&As, demos, and conversations here in the studio, the Daily Wrap is here to give you one final half hour of awesome speakers. Now, we want to start with three people who've really nailed it and been on point today in their breakout sessions. We'll have Gonzalo Ron. He'll be taking us through about space exploration. We have Chris Buckley, who will be revealing some very unconventional tips for architects. And we have Colette Gurich, who will be sharing how startups can actually harness the power of the cloud.
All right, let's get the ball rolling with Gonzalo Ron, Senior Partner Sales Solution Architect, to talk about space. I'm so excited. Gonzalo, you know I have been looking forward to this chat. I love space, have been a very advocate of this sci-fi stuff for a long time. So tell me, how in AWS does what we do in cloud computing align with space?
Sure. Well, think about it. If internet in the 80s, 90s gave humanity the ability to connect and collaborate quickly, cloud computing is giving us the ability to execute. Think about it. In the past, if you wanted to do something simple, like a chatbot, you had to find a group of experts and spend significant resources to make it happen. Today, we have services that allow you to create some of your products quickly and with low effort. That's no different for the space industry. AWS is helping our customers to experiment in different areas. For instance, you can now capture your Earth images from space and produce immediate value from them. I'm talking about use cases like agriculture, pest controls, and managing natural disasters. Just imagine implementing this without cloud computing.
So we have quite a few large agri-tech customers in a pretty significant industry. Think about Balanced Nutrients in New Zealand. Huge companies that are very interested in these use cases. In your presentation, though, you mentioned HPC, or high-performance computing. How do customers leverage something like that for these practical use cases they're dealing with today?
Yes, some of our customers are taking advantage of HPC capabilities to produce results in record time. As I show in my presentation, one clear example is how Matsar is using HPC on AWS for weather prediction, 58% quicker than the weather supercomputer.
So AWS is helping many customers with many different use cases. But I'm interested to know, instead of talking tech, what does it actually look like in terms of some of these exciting Earth observation advancements?
Sure. So satellite technology and cloud computing are both improving quickly. And when you marry these two things together, that's a powerful combination. From the technical side, I'm fascinated about having a service like AWS Ground Station that can help you to schedule your satellite contacts and bring Earth images to an Amazon S3 bucket. So when your images are there, you're at home. You can start taking advantage of any of the other services. You can, for example, store your images, minimizing cost, and then identify particular objects on those images using our machine learning services.
So even beyond that, let's say you're joining and you're more interested in the applications that will actually affect people day to day in their normal daily lives. Do you have any examples of how this can be applied in different ways?
Of course. I'm very excited about how observing our planet from space is improving our daily lives. In the presentation, we talk about some of the use cases that they are endless. For instance, living in Australia, I know how important it is to detect bushfires quickly. We're talking about Earth observation potentially saving life and property.
Wow, that's pretty big, saving lives and property. I think there also could be some cool use cases for counting cows in New Zealand as well, and sheep. Yeah, we should get on that one.
Sure.
Let's say someone wants to create a startup. Maybe I'm interested in space and want to create something. What do you have to do? Do you have to have cloud computing expertise to get started? And where would the best place be for someone to start?
Well, you could start learning yourself using the free resources from our training and certification website. Another very good option is using AWS partners. There are plenty of our partners specialized in areas like machine learning, HPC, and software development. If you would like to contact us, we can share advice about how to find the partner for your project.
All right. Well, you know I'm very passionate about space, and I definitely want to figure out how to get that startup going. So thank you, Gonzalo.
No worries.
Always so inspiring to hear about space innovation, how AWS is impacting our customers every day, and how this all applies to life here on Earth. It's sad to have to wrap this section already, but we will need to say goodbye for now. Dean, I'm going to hand the reins over to you for a chat with Chris Buckley, Senior Partner Solutions Architect.
Thanks, Tiffany and Gonzalo. How awesome is it to hear about how our technology will really help save lives? And the fact that that startup community can actually build these solutions that actually interact with the space industry. I'd like to actually now have a chat to our one of our partner SAs, Chris Buckley, talking about some of the unconventional tips to be a successful solution architect. So, Chris, thanks for coming into the studio. In your session, you actually gave the top 10 tips for AWS architects. I've actually been an AWS architect for the last 10 years and not wanting to reveal my age, architect for about 20 years as well, and obviously picking up tips along the way. But your session actually had some really insightful recommendations that I'd love to explore further. Maybe tell me what's one of your favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to. I will say at first, it is really tough to pick a favorite because I love all of the tips equally. But, to be honest, I think the most important thing that every architect should be thinking about in 2022 is sustainability. As I say in the session, it's not enough that your workloads provide a great customer experience, which is important, but they also have to be kind to the planet.
And so this is definitely a new area in terms of measuring and evaluating environmental impact and how to be kind to the planet. But what tools are available in order for customers to do so?
Well, AWS has introduced services that can actually assist with operating sustainable workloads in the cloud. With the new well-architected pillar that focuses on sustainability, you can find that in the well-architected tool. And with our carbon footprint tool, you can also get a great snapshot of how sustainable a workload is today. From there, strategies can be developed to improve that over time. So you can continue to monitor your carbon footprint as you go. At the same time, we're continuing to work towards our own target of powering our operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025. This can drive passive reduction in our customers' carbon footprint as ours is reduced.
So it sounds like it can be very easy to get started. What can people do right now?
Well, one of the key actions that everyone can take right now, whether they're an architect, a developer, an ops engineer, or even an executive, is to look at all their business decisions through the lens of sustainability. To take a simple example, you could absolutely design an architecture to guarantee 24/7 uptime for an app. But do users actually need that? If the business only needs the app to be online from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then you could use automation to make sure that the infrastructure is only running at that time. You'll more than likely be saving costs with this design, which is great, but you're also going to be reducing the carbon footprint of your workload, and all from looking at that workload from the perspective of what the business or your users actually need.
Yeah, I mean, elasticity has always been one of the key foundations and fundamentals of cloud computing, and to see that being extended into that sustainability pillar as well really provides a lot more insights and capabilities to architects like ourselves too. And so then what advice would you give to other aspiring cloud architects, maybe even tenured cloud architects as well, who are just maybe getting started or maybe even been in the industry like us for quite some time?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the course of my career, and I will say that, this is just over the course of my career and I'm still learning every single day, I've found that technology, especially in the cloud, is endlessly fascinating and it's constantly evolving. When you've got so many services you can use to solve problems, it's really easy to actually get a bit distracted by all the wonderful things that you can build.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I remember when I first started with AWS, we had about 20 fully featured services. Now we have over 200 fully featured services. So, as technologists, it is easy to get distracted. And so how can we guide people on avoiding getting distracted with all of this cool technology?
Yeah, so the key piece of advice that I would offer to someone who's getting started out today, or as you said, someone who's been in the industry for even a decade, 2 decades, because it's always current, is that you should always be remembering why you're building something, and also be able to explain the value of what you're building. So the ability to build a solution is great, but having the ability to explain why you've built it is invaluable. At AWS, we're always talking about working backwards from business problems or customer requirements and then shaping the solutions based on those outputs. So I think this is actually one of the ways that we're able to build such amazing services and help our customers solve some of the toughest problems in the world. So yes, technology is incredibly exciting. Never forget that. But you should always start with why and work backwards to define your solutions. This will ensure you're always building something for a reason. Not only will this help guide your decisions, it will make it so much easier to demonstrate the value of what you've built to people who might not understand the technology as deeply as you do. The best architects can explain the most complex concepts in a way that anyone can understand them, whether they've been using AWS since launch or if they have no technical experience at all.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that why and working backwards approach is something that was very peculiar to me when I first joined AWS, but you really see how that can drive success with a lot of customers, and also how AWS and what more widely Amazon can really innovate and iterate on the actual platform. Absolutely. So I must say, Chris, some really practical, seasoned advice for architects. We really appreciate your time on that.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Tiffany with Colette Gurich, who's the ANZ head of Startup BD. We actually heard Colette speak earlier today about how small startups use AWS programs to get ahead. Tiffany, over to you.
All right, Colette, thanks for joining me. What do you think about our living room?
I have to say, I love the color scheme. Did you choose it yourself?
Yes, purple and orange are top of my personal color palette. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining me here. As you've heard, I've just recently been talking to Gonzalo about starting my own space startup, and I'd love to hear from an expert. Is now a good time to start a startup?
Oh my gosh, Tiffany. Look, you know, I deeply, firmly believe that startups shape the future. And right now, the world needs more startups to reimagine and reinvent our future. And the one thing that I've always found so inspiring about founders is they have this uncanny ability to see challenges as opportunities. So they're really curious about how the world works. They're super creative about how the world could work better. And then they're incredibly courageous in taking action to build solutions and businesses that do, in fact, change the world. And as it turns out, when you solve big problems, you build big businesses. So, you know, take, for example, unicorn startups like Canva and Immutable and Linktree or Zeller. They all chose to start and scale on AWS. And then for every one of those unicorn success stories, there are thousands of startups who are, you know, launching really exciting solutions, whether it's in climate or fintech, AI, ML, or SaaS, health tech. That's just like a couple that I can call out. And I just feel really incredibly inspired and humbled when I think about the fact that AWS provides the underlying building blocks for all of these future shapers across different industries to solve any problem that you can really think of. So it's a great time.
Clearly, you're not passionate about this subject at all, Colette. So, but what's the secret? Because I think a lot of people who are joining are actually really curious about how do you get into the startup space? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the first thing to know is that the startup ecosystem is made up of so many dynamic and really welcoming organizations. And there's a lot of, networks across accelerators and incubators, investors, whether it's conference designers or operators. And then there's like a whole plethora of startup programs everywhere. And all of us want all of you to be part of this ecosystem. So bring your ideas and come and build the future. And that's really why the AWS Startups team works with all of these hundreds of partners across the ecosystem to really just help build that community and that capability to support startups in their early stages with programs like the AWS Activate program that I talked about earlier, so that all startups can get access to things like cloud credits and training that helps them get started faster and at no cost. And that's we mentor, we workshop, we run pitch competitions, we even run like this really exciting CTO fellowship that I talked about earlier. And all of that is really just to help founders accelerate their success. So at scale, I guess you can say, we connect the dots across the ecosystem so that we can all raise the bar on what's possible for startups in Australia and New Zealand.
That's an amazing community that you've really built across all these different teams. And I know that you're very active in this ecosystem, so you must have your finger on the pulse. What are some of the trends that you've noticed recently that we can share with the audience?
Yeah, so I just want to say that we've spent the past decade kind of accelerating and expanding in all the different dimensions that contribute to a vibrant and successful ecosystem. So that's investment capital, customers, buying startups and startup solutions, talent, the sense of community that we have, and then the expertise that we're cultivating. So across all those dimensions, we've just scaled. But what really stands out for me is that there is 30 times more capital being invested into startups today than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And even just from last year to this year, we tripled the investment to $10 billion. 10 billion with a B invested into startups. So that means like roughly 66% more startups received funding last year than in 2020. We just had a handful of investors previously. We now have well over 300 investment firms for startups to choose from. And I think I saw the last number was something like 876 angels. So that's angels, VCs, revenue-based financing, even things like token investments with Web3 startups. So, and I want to say, while not every startup can, will, or should take investment, the fact that there's, we look at investment as this marker of the ecosystem, and a really important part of that, of what drives future startups to get started.
30 times more investment, though.
Yes.
There's hope for my space startup that I'm going to work
You've
on.
got a chance.
So what are the most exciting spaces that you see for startups in Australia and New Zealand right now, locally?
Okay, so this is the prediction, the crystal ball question,
yes.
magic ball question. So in terms of a prediction, I really see fintech and sustainability-focused startups continue to set the global trend right here out of Australia and New Zealand, because we've rapidly upskilled in those areas. There's a lot of investment in that. And then the other one is Web3. And we've specifically in the AWS Startups team upskilled our team to support those really crazy, wild new ideas that we're finding in that Web3 space.
Yeah. So how can founders find out more about your team and get in touch with you to participate in this fabulous ecosystem?
Well, first off, we have awesome sessions right here at Summit where you can get a taste of our team, like who we are, what we work on. Earlier today, we talked to Nick Crocker, who's a partner at Blackbird, as well as Tim Doyle, who's the founder of Eucalyptus, on sort of the future of health tech. So there's that. And if you're interested, you can look at that afterwards on the Summit. Come back and have a little snoop. And then if you're interested in the Web3 space that I talked about, then make sure you tune in tomorrow, because we have a session that is looking at how one of our rocket ship startups out of New Zealand, you'd be so proud, VV, built a really successful NFT startup. And then there's another session that's one of my favorites, and that's how to build a Web3 startup on AWS. So aside from Summit, when Summit is all over and done and dusted, you can connect with us one-on-one on office hours on the AWS Startup Loft. And then if you're part of the startup community, you can just reach out to one of your community or program managers and just ask them to connect you directly to us, because we would, love to meet you, and then just find out how we can help you.
Thank you, Colette. It's so good to chat with you about this. I can just feel all the energy and innovation.
Super fan.
Yay.
Thanks, Tiffany.
My pleasure.
Wow, what a time to be a technologist indeed. I'm really still absorbing some of the insights from our breakout speakers, talking about how startups can take advantage and really be the pioneers in various technical domains, whether it's Web3 or in NFT. Hearing about how the domain of space, which was really restricted to certain organisations in the past, has really opened it up to a wide variety of organisations, big or small. And then, of course, hearing about some of the new considerations to take in when, as an architect, you are designing these resilient and robust platforms by being able to really optimise it to minimise and limit the environmental impact. Tiffany, what do we have in store for tomorrow in terms of sessions?
Thank you. I made it over here. If you've loved what Gonzalo, Chris, Colette, and our other speakers had to share, then don't forget to tune in for tomorrow's breakouts. We'll have a live Q&A at the end of each session where you can ask your questions to each speaker. Today's breakfast sessions focused around beginner to advanced sessions. And tomorrow, we're going to up the ante a little bit with sessions ranging from level 200, which is about intermediate, to level 400. That's expert, Dean. I'd encourage folks to jump to the left navigation and click Find Sessions to take a look, plan your day, and decide what sessions you can't miss. And of course, don't forget to add us to your agenda. Dean, what are the sessions that are standing out to you the most?
Well, Tiffany, I think the oh yeah was probably making it obvious. So definitely the 400 level sessions. It's always great to do a technical deep dive and really get into the inner workings of various solutions. I mentioned at the start of the day that way back in 2014, when we first started ANZ Summits, I was very privileged to be involved in delivering some expert level sessions. Now, whilst a lot of those tips and information can be obsolete, but at the time, I'd like to say that it's really technical thought leading.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also looking forward to Anitha Dina Dayalan's session in the developer track. Anitha will actually be diving deep on how to build resilient microservices using fault-tolerant systems. That really sounds interesting to me. And for any Kubernetes fans out there, Joshua Samuel is doing a session called Rollout of Kubernetes for hundreds of enterprise workloads, sharing the experiences of the National Australia Bank. That one's actually in the architect track. And if you're looking into the future, Brendan Myers is actually sharing how to build, launch and scale your Web3 startups on AWS. All very cool.
Very cool.